On today's show, we'll be joined by Houston Rockets broadcaster Ryan Hollins to understand what does Ime Udoka bring to the table for this Houston Rockets team. What were the most important developments of this past season? Who grew the most? Which individual player grew the most from the start of the season to the end of the season? Plus a look ahead at what things could happen this offseason for your Houston Rockets. All that and more coming right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. If you're an everydayer, thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Joining us now is one of the voices for your Houston Rockets, none other than the man Ryan Hollins himself. So happy to have you back here on the program, Ryan. It's an exciting time for Rockets fans, right? I mean, look, last, couple seasons have been a little rough and tumble with so many young guys, but we've made it through what ownership and Rafael Stone are calling kind of phase one of the rebuild. We're moving into phase two now, and the big part of phase two was figuring out who the next head coach of this team was going to be. A lot of respect, a lot of love for what Stephen Silas did for this organization, but
Sure.
Ime Udoka coming into the scene, a guy who the last time he was coaching a team, he made it to the finals with the Boston Celtics. He is a really, really high quality coach. What do you see Ime Udoka bringing to this Rockets team?
Well, I think for one, you have to establish that he's going to have different results here in Houston that he isn't going to have in Boston. It's two different scenarios. So we can't expect that, hey, this here is just going to translate over here, especially with today's athletes. But in saying that, we can glean some things from what he was able to do in Boston. They couldn't get over the edge. They were a little inconsistent. They had a lot of talent, and Boston was one of those teams that, was on the verge of like, all right, do we trade some guys? Do we break it up? Do we keep it together? Or do we just try to make it fit? And when Ime came in, it was very controversial taking over for Brad Stevens, who did an excellent job, but Ime ended up being the guy. And I really think of Jason Tatum. The reason I think of Jason Tatum is because he was one of the more talented young players in the league, still is. He's actually grown into a little more of that veteran status now. But the change that I saw in him defensively, Boston changed defensively. They grinded different. They worked different. And I couldn't say that I would think top to bottom they could win games in the playoffs on the defensive end of the floor, but that became their MO. And then I think they became dangerous, and I think they tailed back a little bit offensively from Brad Stevens, who was just a mastermind offensively, and that defense was there, and they became a more sound team. And I think when we're looking at Coach Ime Udoka, you want to just dot the I's and cross the T's, and I think a little more of the consistency is something that you look for. Our guys getting a little bit older. You can expect, possibly some changes to the roster or additions, better yet, additions to the roster rather than changes. And I think Udoka is going to have something to come in and work with. And he is, hired in a sense before the draft. So he knows kind of, hey, what are the draft needs? He can kind of tell his strategy there and, on into free agency. So I think it's very exciting time. And I think that, hey, don't say, hey, man, Rockets are going to the NBA Finals. He did it there. He's going to do it here. I don't think that's a fair assessment, but I think you can look for more of the consistency. And I tell you, man, I played against Ime, dog. Jackson, He's intimidating, man. Listen, as a young player, I gotta admit, I was scared of Ime Udoka. I'm like, man, that dude means business, man. And he came in like he was a little older of a rookie, a little more seasoned, like no games in San Antonio. But he's gonna bring respect immediately because of his size. Hey, he had a respect as a player. So as a coach, you expect it's gonna be there too.
You have any stories about going up against Ime specifically? Anything you remember, a matchup or a moment on the court sharing with him? Any back and forth between him?
You know, I didn't compete against him. You know, or if it was for a short enough amount of time. But like, there's this like stare that he has, like it was like this, like almost like when he played, like, you know, coaches looking up. As a player, he'd like be looking down, and it was this stare, and it's like. He was a consistent, hardworking 3-and-D guy, defended, locked up, did the dirty work, you know, hit open threes, could hit a shot. So he was tough.
I'm picturing Ime doing like the LeBron Miami stare, right? Where he's like leaned over with the headband, like that, like angry, just like look.
Yes.
It's kind of what I'm envisioning. Look, Ryan, Ime has talked a lot in, you know, a handful of interviews already as the new head coach for the Rockets about kind of the relationship part of coaching, right? Building those relationships with his players. I mean, how do you weigh that, you know, when you compare, you know, in comparison to things like the X's and O's side of coaching, right? The importance of building and establishing those relationships with your players to get the most out of them.
You got to put in the work. You can't fake it. I think as far as the relationships, you know, he's going to have to be talking to these guys after practice. He's going to be in their ear. And I think, you know, as a player, removing myself, the coaches, obviously you want to work hard regardless, because if you didn't do the job, somebody else was going to do the job. But when I felt like the coach had my best interest in hand, I want to play even harder for him. And, you know, obviously, hey, let's tag back to Coach Stevens. He did an excellent job of that, you know, and I think it showed, even though I know we're talking about Coach Udoka, but I'll give you an example. I mean, Coach's father passed, and those boys went out and beat the Milwaukee Bucks, and then came out and beat Phoenix. They did that for Coach. Our guys weren't really, you know, strategically equipped or seasoned enough, you know, at least per what the experts say to get that win. But they stepped up and did that for Coach. So I think you're looking for Ime to come in and build those ties with these young guys, put in the work, and they'll go out and they'll play for you, man. They'll work for you. They'll grind for you. So I think that's something that, you know, I guess from the extra effort standpoint, he you know, you'll be looking for him to go out and take.
Coming up, we're going to get into some reflection on this past season. Who grew the most out of the Rockets' young core? What were some of the most important developments of this last year? We're going to get there in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Devin Booker to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Joel Embiid to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can go up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections made available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for everything over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. And right now, every day during the NBA playoffs, one Prize Picks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. But you have to download the app to find out how. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, chatting with the Ryan Hollins. Now, Ryan, when kind of looking back at this season, you know, some ups and downs, maybe a bit more downs than you would have hoped for, but this was a team that, you know, everything was always about development during this first stage of the rebuilding process, right? Watching these young guys grow and get better kind of on an individual basis. And you see the flashes when they're able to kind of put it together as a team. But when you look at guys like Jalen, Jabari, Alpi, Kevin, Tari, what to you were some of the most important developments that you saw out of some of these guys this past season?
Who are you the second and third time that you see this same matchup? Fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me twice. Shame on me, right? I like that we saw our guys grow every time. And, we'll think back, most notably, when Jabari first saw LeBron and LeBron scored 48 or 45 points on him. And, then the second time was kind of like, okay, I get a little bit. I'm not going to be deer in the headlights as much, And I think that for our young guys, you start to get used to the strategies. You start to get I can tell you that player X, he's a strong right-hand driver. He gets the basketball, he's going right. And you're going to get in the game and he's going to go right and beat you right. You go, man, he's a whole lot faster than I thought he was. Or, hey, Klay Thompson, if you leave for a second, you're late. He's going to let the ball go. And before it even touches his hands almost, it's going to be a three-pointer. In the second, third time, you see that. So I feel like there was growth from each and every one of our guys around the second or third time that they fell into situations. Hey, man, I thought down the stretch, it wasn't spoken of much. And it may be a baby step, but I thought Alp defensively, really said, let me be better. Let me go out and work. Let me be better in pick and roll coverage. Let me figure things out because, man, I know the frustration from the Rocket fans of not being kind of in the mix and tough not winning. I mean, honestly, from everybody, nobody wants to go and lose within the development, but our guys got better, man. Our guys got better, and I think you got to see those baby steps, those little celebrations, along the way, and just realizing how young our guys were, man. I mean, this was we were dude, we're we're historically young.
They were like a college team out there, man. That I remember at one point there was a stat somewhere in the middle of the season that the UH Cougars actually had an older starting lineup than the Rockets did at one point this season, which is just crazy to think about. They were trotting out a college team basically.
And I tell you right now, it is so hard to assess. So it's hard to look at certain things. And I say assess in the sense that if you saw Ryan Hollins at 18, at 21, and then at 26, a completely different player. So our guys are gonna grow. And there are some guys that, they don't grow, they don't mature, they don't like basketball, or I don't want to say they don't take that next step. But I think that what I love about our young guys is that you're going to see them take those next steps in a sense because they love basketball. Like Jalen Green is somewhere in the gym working, getting up shots. Alpes, somewhere, preparing. Our guys love basketball. Do you enjoy basketball? And I think our scouting department did an excellent job of going out and getting guys that enjoy the game when they're not in the game, when they're not Tari Eason is probably going to play in every single pro-am this summer. Knowing the man, he's going to be in every city, you know what I'm saying? But our guys love basketball. They're going to get better. So the same Tari Eason you see right now, he's going to be a different Tari Eason next year and the year after and the year after because they go and work. So I think that's what's so encouraging about our guys being young because they're going to take that next step. And sometimes, man, in year 2 and 3, you can see some giant leaps, man.
Right. Do you love basketball? Do you live and breathe the game, or do you kind of treat it as your 9-to-5 job where you show up, you do your job, and then, when it's all said and done, you're like, all right, it's my off season. It's my time to be me, that kind of thing. It does feel like so many of the guys on this roster really do live and breathe hoops. So that is an exciting thing to consider when you talk about kind of how this team can grow and develop moving forward. Ryan, in your eyes, who from where they were to start this past season, right? Who grew the most in your eyes from the beginning of the season, game 1, all the way through game 82, final game of the year?
Jabari was stockpiling double-doubles down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, we pointed it out on a recent episode. He finished the year with 16 double-doubles, but he had 8 of them after the All-Star break. I mean, he was stacking them up. His rebounding numbers were a lot better that final stretch of the season for sure.
Beginning of the season, Jabari was just standing in the corner, catching and shooting. And, he was making efforts defensively, but he didn't, it was, things were as expected. Don't get me wrong, as expected. And towards the end of the season, man, he was blocking shots out of area. He was, he was getting like that New York game. He was bringing the ball up, man, going through the legs, getting into the lane, knocking down shots. His communication, just getting more comfortable playing the game of basketball. I felt like he really, really grew. And, hats off to the organization. They were willing to take those lumps with Jabari to watch him get better. And now you say, all right, what's he going to look like in summer league? What's he going to look like, training camp? That growing is still there. So I think there's a lot of promise there. But I think by far, physically, like, I don't know if you saw, like, honestly, he had put 5 pounds on a muscle.
He got a little bit bigger, right? Like, as the season went along.
Yes. And you saw him, not being, knocked out. There were moments earlier on where, he'd go for a rebound, this and that, he'd follow. Everyone's going to fall over. Don't get me wrong. But the percentages or the stages of which he would fall over and, not be able to kind of hold his ground definitely changed. He got a lot stronger. He had the most significant leap, man. I don't know if it was like Jalen Green. No, Jalen, like, kind of figured things out. Jalen Green to like 40-ball Jalen Green and 30-ball, 20-ball Jalen Green that we saw. But it was definitely there, to each his own.
It's funny because, you mentioned earlier, right, the differences in how these guys went up against certain matchups, the second, third time they face guys. It's funny looking at how the Rockets handled the Bucks in, what was it, game 3, I think, of the season, right? And, it's the home opener in Milwaukee. They're juiced there. Everybody's excited. And Giannis, I think, dropped like 40 that game. Like, he was unstoppable. And then later, right, they meet up again with Milwaukee in Houston. And that game was easily, I think, one of the best games of the season. And Jabari wasn't even good offensively that game. Like, we're gonna keep it a buck. We'll be completely honest. No pun intended there. Damn, wow, that's awful. Anyways, wow, I'm on my Reggie Miller thing right now. Anyways, but legitimately, right? Jabari was not great offensively that game, but he was so good defensively, and you really saw him like taking the challenge of going toe to toe with Giannis on the defensive side of the ball. So many great possessions and sequences from that game where you kind of saw him growing up, and you're like, oh, okay. These are the flashes of how impactful he can be as a defender at the NBA level.
Yeah, these guys aren't your friend. This guy Giannis has probably the highest motor in the league. He's trying to elbow you, kick you, dunk on you, stomp on you, gonna look at you and run back down on the other end. So Jabari went in like Tari too, and was like, all right, that guy ain't like, if he gonna get me, we just gonna have to fight. He got to run me over. And then there was a moment in the game where they tried to get Giannis the basketball, and Jabari stole it. He knocked it away, and it was kind of like, okay, I got a wingspan too, man. I'm kind of athletic. I can move my feet. I'm active, hybrid, ball player too. So that was one of the instant gratification games, but nonetheless, one of the moments where he got to learn. I had him on my podcast, and he talked about that. Like, the first time, Giannis stepped through and dunked, he was like, okay, that's different. And I mean, Jabari also understand Giannis Antetokounmpo does that to NBA veterans. He does that to OGs. He does that to everybody. But hey, it's definitely a welcome. They got their welcome to the league's moment.
So, for me, that game absolutely has to be up there. The Bucks win in Houston. There were so many great games though from this past season, right? And they actually wound up beating. It was kind of crazy for a team that had the record that the Rockets did this last season, right? They walked away with wins against the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Sixers, the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference at home, which all of those games were kind of crazy, right? The OT win against the Sixers, the great win against Boston later in the season in March. I mean, for you, Ryan, what was your favorite game of the season? If you can narrow it down to just one. If you can't, you can give me a couple of them, but if you can get it to just one, what would you name as your favorite game of the season?
We talked about it. I can't gloss over it. It was that Bucks win for Coach Silas.
Okay.
It was that like, dang, Coach, we hurting, but we got you. We know you're not here. I'm sure emotionally he was probably watching that game going, like, look at these kids. As a father, I see every once in a while I get that cool moment with my kids. And I'm not saying it's a father to son, but that kind of like, it's that moment you didn't expect them to, I don't want to say care that much, but yeah, like they laid it out there for Coach. And you try to keep your adult issues with being an adult and let kids be kids, but every time wow, they step up and they surprise you. And I thought that was one of the cool games just to see that they get it. And you wouldn't fault them if they didn't by any measure. They're young. We were young. There's so many things went right over my head, but I thought just emotionally that was big, seeing Coach Lucas just kind of just roll with the moment and his excitement and throwing his arms during that game. And it was a fun one. And, on that same note, I feel like the excitement that we can have moving forward of the way our roster was constructed, our young roster is constructed to go after Golden State. It's constructed to go after the Bucks. It's constructed to go after the Kings. You see we're very similar. It's funny that if we see our roster makeup right now, we're very similar to the Kings, who are just a little bit more experienced, a little more okay, this is what the playoffs look like away from
there's a blueprint there, man. You see
sure.
Fox, Sabonis, Jalen, Alp, like it's very similar.
You can throw the Kings in that play. We were a fouled, called a hair. Eric probably got Fox by a hair on that foul. 3-pointer away from beating the Kings.
Yeah.
So we're equipped to match up with those teams because we run, we spread you out, we can play some one-on-one, we can get downhill. And I think that as the experience comes, we just look ugly. We'll just throw it out there. And this is expected. Our team would look ugly against the experienced teams. Like the Brooklyn Nets just, moving and passing and cutting and setting screens and, rotating and, playing. Like our team had to get used to that. So it's almost like it's that potential, like, hey, this is what it could be. And we can match up well against those teams that run, that get up and down that fast, because as we're watching the playoffs, that's what it is. The game is really fast. There's a lot of shooting. The floor is spread out. And then you got to have versatility. And I think the exciting thing is that our roster can kind of compete at that level with what we're putting into there. Far from it, but we're not, the roster is not being constructed to go out and compete and be like, let's just be a steady team in the playoffs. It's like, no, this is how teams are winning at a high level. Let's put together the pieces that win at a really, really high championship level, and let's develop them and then add into them and nurture them. And hey, man, got some options there. I think it's a fun, good place to be when you take that perspective.
Yeah, building towards the kind of long-term success, right? Not trying to make a Band-Aid fix, not trying to, this organization very clearly has their eyes set on a title a little bit further down the line. Maybe Tillman jumped the gun a little bit, put Ime on the spot.
That's the idea.
Try to figure out when the next title was going to be. That question was so funny.
We're not saying that, but it's a foundation, right? You didn't start your media career just at like full blown Jackson Gatlin. Like you started like, hey, hi guys, I'm Jackson Gatlin.
Whoa! I do not sound like that, Ryan.
Hey guys, hey, can I follow you around somewhere? I'm sure you were. That was me, man.
Why am I catching these strays on my own show?
Hey guys, I'm Jackson. Nice to meet you. And then it was like, hey, how you doing, man? I work for here. I do this, and then there's another progression. Come on, man. We all had to start somewhere, man.
Oh man, he killed me on my own show. I cannot believe it. All right,
have some fun with you, man.
Hey, man. All right. Coming up, we're gonna talk about one guy from this Rockets roster, KJ Martin, who had a bunch of different roles this past season. What does the future look like for KJ? What does the future look like for this team? We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Ryan, Rockets fans have been in my mentions, in the YouTube comments. They've wanted your thoughts about KJ Martin for a minute now. And so we're going to talk a little KJ here, because he was a guy who I really think did arguably the most with his minutes when given them this past season, right? And he had, different roles, right? He started the year coming off the bench, but then he was kind of like the swing starter, right? If guys were, if Kevin missed a game or if Eric missed a game, KJ was like the de facto, like, all right, he's in the starting lineup now. Then Eric gets moved, KJ becomes the starter. And whether he was coming off the bench or starting, it felt like he always had a really strong impact on the game. He to me, he's a guy that very much knows his role, understands what he's supposed to do on the court. However, when you look at kind of where this team is going this offseason, some of the additions that they might make, you look at that small forward spot on the roster, and that might be the spot where they decide to bring in, right, a veteran presence or a more established guy, somebody who's, a bit further along in his career as a player. So to you, what is the number one thing that KJ can work on or refine with his game to either be competitive for that starting 3 spot, come training camp, or if that spot goes to maybe a more veteran guy, what's the thing that KJ can add to his game to work on to try and kind of earn that spot back over time?
I was, if I'm gonna, I gotta nitpick KJ because man, he does so many things. Well, I gotta really nitpick this. I would say, just one-on-one, being like a primary ball handler, playing on ball. I think he is like, his numbers are elite in the entire league as far as back cutting, moving without the basketball, setting screens. He's elite. Like, he's got that. That's not that's locked up. I would just say maybe being on the ball, that changes his whole. That changes his whole value. If he's a guy that's a primary that's getting downhill. I like that he drives and he already kind of makes plays. That's all I can really find.
He kind of added that swing pass this last season too, which was real nice, right? He would drive in from like the wing, and if for KJ, right, he takes couple dribbles towards the rim and he can elevate from so far away. It doesn't even matter. But then he would have those moments where if shot blocker rotates over or whatever, he got really good, I think, at swinging that pass out to the opposite corner to the weak side and kind of hitting that corner shooter and keeping the ball moving. And that was something that I thought he added to his game that really helped the offense and really helped him out, right? You don't think of KJ as like a playmaker, but he makes good reads. Like, he makes good passes when he is given the opportunity.
And honestly, like, I felt like he did that. And for him, I always loved, one of my mentors told me this motto: keep it simple, stupid. Not calling me stupid or you stupid, but in the sense of we overthink things. So if I'm KJ, I don't necessarily need the Damian Lillard step back in my game this summer. Sometimes the NBA players, we go and do that. He's so good. It just get to a spot and get your shot off. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, some guys have to shake you and then do all this and get their shot. Like, make one crossover, dip that shoulder, and just get in the lane and jump over everybody. Like, and he honestly, he did a lot of that. So maybe it's just tightening up the dribble, playing through contact.
And he's got that ridiculous touch around the basket too. Like, he's not just a power player where he's got to be dunking the ball. He's got that floater with either hand, but it honestly feels like he's better with his left hand, like kissing it off the glass, or that little kind of teardrop floater that he has around the basket. It's crazy the number of times that he goes up, and it's just, I basically got to the point where if KJ was within 5 feet of the basket, I'm like, oh, this is a bucket. Money.
All right, so okay, here we go. Maybe he can be a guy running the pick and roll rather than setting the pick and roll. We got to force it because he's one of the elite cutters and screeners that we have in the game. And like you said, he finishes well. The Rockets won't have any, with all due respect, wouldn't have like kind of offense going or things. And he just get the ball and just push, or he'd get the ball and run out. He just created so many good things. So I think it's for one, just maintaining what he did this last season, because this was a ridiculous season that he just had, and just, I think, expanding upon it, man. But he had a really good year already. So I think it's staying consistent and building upon the body of work that you've had, along with, maybe like I said, he's more of a primary guy. But I felt like, in the past, KJ with the ball on the break, and he kind of like look for Kevin or Jalen or he
would hesitate for a second, right? Whereas this past year, like, he had more of a willingness to put the ball on the deck himself and just take it,
push.
The whole way.
He did that. So it's like, I think he kind of capitalized on those things. I think, like I just said, I would just say consistency and just being more of a primary ball handler, and then, hey, maybe even, little post moves, you know what I'm saying? Because let's say, the next step, if he's on the perimeter, they're going to say, well, we'll put a small on you. And I felt like there were times where, like, KJ was the guy they picked their poison with. Like, okay, well, Steph Curry, you'll go guard KJ. You know what I'm saying? And then saying, like, hey, feeling confident enough, we'll throw that thing like Tate has his, dribble right, come back, left hook. Like, just get one of those. Like, and I honestly can't even say he doesn't have one. I think it's maybe situationally putting confidence in the coaching staff to call those numbers for him. But he's a guy. He's a guy, Jackson.
I really, right, and it's really exciting to see what the Rockets are going to be able to potentially do with him moving forward. And I do think, right, you know, the biggest maybe weakness for him in that offensive game, though, is you know, getting that three ball a bit more consistent. But you could maybe make that critique about almost everybody on the Rockets roster is, you know, there's talent. They got to refine their shooting a little bit across the board, because that'll open up probably more opportunities for KJ to have those driving opportunities, open up some of those driving lanes to keep the defense honest. But thinking about what Udoka is going to be able to do with a guy like KJ defensively, or guys like Jabari and Tari, and even getting maybe a bit more creative about how you deploy LP defensively as your five, like some of the, like, that's what I'm really excited to see, because KJ's got all the tools to be such a phenomenal NBA defender, right? A guy who's strong enough to guard up from his position, quick enough to guard down. You know, I think we say too often, right, Ryan? Like, you know, a guy can guard 1 through 5. Like there's probably like a handful of guys in the NBA who can actually guard like 1 through 5, but KJ is a guy who could probably guard like 1 through 4 pretty easily. Like, you know, he's got the speed to stick with guards, but he's got the size and strength and obviously the leaping ability to deal with some of the bigger players out there too. And then thinking about what Udoka is going to be able to kind of teach him defensively to get him more to that point. I think that's the thing that I'm most looking forward to seeing, is him taking a step forward on the defensive side of the ball next season with Udoka.
That's twofold. It's the, you know, the chicken or the egg with that. So what do I mean? KJ's a guy that will come over last second and block a dunk, like block a layup, like get an out of area rebound. He'd make those wild plays, but the young Rockets would have like a breakdown, you know? So like, are we talking about the ball pressure? Are we talking about the missed assignment on the backside? When you don't, I was young. I played on young teams. I was young, right? Duh, obviously. When you don't trust that your teammate is going to be there, you kind of roam. So you're like, well, I'm not going to get to my spot. I'm just going to play both spots because there's a mistake that may happen. So as things tighten up, I think the challenge for KJ, which I'm sure he should be adapt to be able to do, is say, hey, man, I'm going to be in this low spot or this position because I'm going to trust that I'm going to have a V back or my man's going to shoot over to the corner, rather than last year was more like, I'm going to play in between and be a little late and use my athleticism because I don't know if Matt Man is going to be there to help me in the corner. I don't know if that makes sense. So I think for him, as Coach Udoka progresses and the team gets better defensively and guys are in the correct places defensively, him being in more of a position, being a better position defender, but I can't say he's a bad position defender because I understand the inconsistencies that our young team had playing against a much older NBA. So I don't think I think just positionally he would catch himself out of position because he was playing the helper. He was playing the roamer role to kind of help with some of the weaknesses that the team had, you know, or inconsistencies against other teams' offenses.
Definitely. And I think that's like schematically, that's going to be I think maybe a step forward. And part of that's just going to be guys getting older, right? Everybody's a year older, another off season to grow and develop and kind of understand, you know, some moments, right? This past year for Jabari, Tari, kind of that deer in headlights moment where it's like, okay, things are moving way faster than I thought they were going to be moving this season. And, you know, seeing that kind of slow down for them and really hopefully, you know, taking a step forward defensively. Nobody's expecting this team to like suddenly be a top 10 defense in the NBA, but being able to take the steps in the right direction is going to be, you know, a nice thing to see, you know, as early as tip off next season, opening night. Ryan, we're so close to the NBA draft lottery, and that's going to have a lot of implications for the Houston Rockets moving forward, how they navigate the offseason, what free agents they may or may not bring in. It could really alter the direction of the franchise depending on if they walk away with the number 1 overall pick or if they walk away with, say, like the 5th or 6th overall pick. But I do want your thoughts, right? There's a lot of hype surrounding this guy, Victor Wembanyama. And like he's getting documentaries made about him already. Like that, you know, you got legends talking about what this kid can bring to the game. I don't think we've seen this level of hype, right, since LeBron came out back in 2003. I mean, what do you see when you look at Victor as a player, as a prospect? What do you see?
Well, wherever he goes, you know, we can't just pencil him into the Rockets. Obviously, it's a 14%
I know.
chance.
It'd be nice if we could pencil him into the Rockets,
right?
But
it'd be like, it like back in the day, like, oh yeah, we got the pick. So it's not, we can't do that now anymore. But I think he's so intriguing because today's game is played with versatility. And if Victor becomes a guy that can, kind of go out forget as a center, just as a basketball player, and you see him bringing the ball up floor, you see him, on the block playing post defense and blocking the shot, you see him as a weak side shot blocker, you see him, switching out and guarding a guard on the perimeter, keeping him in front, using his length and getting a good contest. You see him out in pick and roll coverage, using that humongous wingspan and keeping guys in front of him. Because he has
8 foot wingspan, man. 8 foot wingspan.
He's got incredible foot speed, and then that shooting touch would say, hey, hey, Jalen Green is getting downhill. We got to spread the floor open. Hey, these are 5 guys on the perimeter now, and then 5 guys that can switch with you and guard you inside and outside. That's the excitement of Victor Wembanyama, and he's made some plays that you hadn't quite seen. So I think today's NBA, you're excited where it wasn't Shaquille O'Neal would have been the guy that would have, oh my goodness, Shaq's going to come out down. Let's go get the biggest, strongest guy possible, right? That was go get the biggest, strongest guy possible. Now it's get the tallest, fastest guy possible who can play in and play out, So, hey, maybe he's not going to be the strongest, but maybe he can, maybe he not weigh the most. I can't say the goal would be, we're whoever gets Victor, it is the Rockets or not, whoever gets Victor, it's not going to be like, Victor, let's get you up 360 pounds. It's nah, Victor, let's get you holding your ground inside, using your position and wingspan and blocking shots. So I think that's the excitement for the potential of what he can be in the NBA.
Ryan, it has been fantastic. It's always great talking Rockets ball with you. Do us a favor. You've got your new show out there. It's been out for a minute now, though, but tell everybody about NBA Rookie Life.
Yeah, NBA Rookie Life with Ryan Hollins. Go check it out. Is really cool, and we can have you guys. Let me know if there's any guests you'd like to see on the show, Jackson. I know you shot me a few texts before. We can talk as far as a young Jabari or a rookie in the league, or maybe have some guys incoming into the draft, even some of the OGs. But we dive into what was it like when they were young and they were going through the league, and then we have some fun with them, and it's through the league and iHeartRadio, so we get the chance to chime back to some of their amazing moments during their career and step into a film room, so you get a cool behind the scenes look, and we just have some fun. And I guarantee you, Jackson, at each and every podcast you listen to, you're gonna find out something you never knew about the guys that I'll have on, or maybe you didn't know about the NBA. So it's just some really cool stories, a fun time. And I said, like I said, we have some really cool segments on the show. So you get a chance, check it out, show some love. Hey, if there's something you do like, let me know. If there's something you don't like, let me know that also, man. And we'll do our best to service you moving forward. Ryan, always a pleasure to have you on the program, man. Thanks for stopping by. Hey, appreciate it, brother. Keep up the good work, man. And Jackson Gatlin. we'll bring him back, man. Hey, Jackson Gatlin. I know you got a photo, man, where you got a low little buzz cut, like the baby face. Just tweet me the little photo of Jackson with this little, everything all buttoned up. It's not happening. No. On that note, we're wrapping it up. Oh, game over. God, show's done. Jackson Gatlin. And that's going to do it for another edition of Locked on Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app. Free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. What was the most promising development of this past season in your eyes? Let us know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.